Yeah. Yeah, this show got a lot of flack for being inaccurate, but a lot of the stuff is dead on to how it really is. Hey, I'm Shaun. I was a pre-medical student for 3 semesters from 2003 to 2004, and I'm here today to break down some medical scenes from different TV shows and movies to see how accurate they are. First up is House MD. And for all the different things that are going on and the different experiments and procedures that they're doing, things in hallways and sort of, I think a lot of these things are pretty intrusive and invasive. What they did nail is that not everyone wears lab coats. And you can see there's a lot of people who wear lab coats, but as a pre-medical student, there were a lot of people wearing lab coats, but not everyone wore them. And so this is pretty accurate. Walking through any of the buildings that I had to walk through, you would see a lot of people just in street clothes, not in suits or anything like that. So I'd give this one 9 out of 10. Face Off. So I love this movie, and I love this movie before I was a pre-med student. And this is actually one of the reasons that I went into the pre-med program, because I saw procedures like this and I wanted to be a part of something like this. And for as many sort of people as rolled their eyes at this when it first came out, a lot of this is, although futuristic, pretty accurate. Most of the buildings that we were in didn't have big windows. It was just, a single door with like a window in the door, maybe a couple windows to the outside, maybe. But these sort of labs that have just a big glass window where you can sort of see where the procedures are taking place, you're seeing a lot more of these now in modern hospitals and modern medical schools. And so this is pretty accurate, this sort of experience of walking by and seeing these labs, regardless of what's happening on the inside. This is a pretty realistic thing of what it feels like to walk through one of these buildings. So I would say a little futuristic, but 8 out of 10, 8.5 out of 10. Oh, Grey's Anatomy. So Grey's Anatomy was just coming on for the first time as I was finishing up in college in those sort of mid-2000s. And so as I was a pre-med student, I'm seeing this, and a lot of my classmates are seeing this. And so there are some things here that I think are a bit of a stretch, but a lot of it, especially these first seasons where it's about, being a resident, being in medical school, a lot of the stuff is similar to the pre-med experience. And one of the things that right away that I see is the relationships. There's a lot of people in the pre-med world and in the medical world who do date each other. And it is realistic because you're around these people. They have shared interests a lot of times and shared experiences. And so as you go through these things with people, you do end up forming bonds, and some people turn those bonds into long-term relationships. And I have friends who were students together who got married and stuff. And so, yeah, I would say very accurate, 10 out of 10. I would say this is very much what it was like as far as just different people meeting each other and finding relationships in the medical world. Patch Adams. I love this movie. I don't even remember when it came out. 98. Yeah, so that was before I was even in high school, before I knew I would go into biology really, and then end up going pre-med for 3 semesters. And seeing this now, it's cool that it's based on a true story. This is an actual person that exists and advocated in this way and is still doing amazing things. But this movie sort of raised some eyebrows as far as how much of this could you really get away with? What of this is more theatrics than it is the actual story? But for me, as I did most of my experience as a pre-med student, we weren't in any hospitals. I did go to a hospital twice for friends who'd gotten really hurt. And in that, there were kids around. This is something you see. A lot of hospitals do have kids, and kids make up a good percentage of medical cases that are out there. And so, yeah, this is pretty realistic. And especially today, you see a lot of this going on with just different medical needs that are happening. And so, yeah, there's hospitals that are just all about kids, and it's a cool thing to see. So I'd say this is exactly what it's really like out there in the hospitals and stuff like that. So 10 out of 10. No notes. Patch Adams. Dr. Seuss the Grinch. This is a classic. And so this was written long. I don't even know when this was. Do you know when this was written? It was written before I was born, and then turned into this. But this here of the enlarged heart, this is an actual thing that cardiac patients experience. There are people with enlarged hearts, and it can be a very dangerous thing. I'm not familiar with the species, and in my 3 semesters as a pre-med student, we didn't look into anything like this particularly, but depending on how small the heart was beforehand, some amount of enlargement might have been necessary, maybe even chemically induced, but to see this happen so quickly is probably a bit alarming, and I would get this checked out. These x-ray machines, that really was what it was like back in the 50s and 60s. This is the technology they had. Now we have nuclear magnetic resonance imaging and EKGs and a lot more tools that doctors have to deal with heart stuff, as I've seen on other TV shows. But this at the time, this is pretty accurate. So even though it's aged a bit, I would give this 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10. But I mean, at the time, this was pretty much dead on what it would be like to have an enlarged heart. Lastly, Band of Brothers. Now, I love this. This came out when I was in college, just before I went to college, I think. And as a pre-med student, there's a lot here that is pretty accurate. And while I'm not a battlefield expert, some of the procedures that they're doing here are gross. And surgery is really gross. This is pretty accurate. A lot of times there is sort of juice and like just sort of stuff around the wounds and stuff like that. And as you're making an incision, it's really gross. And so, yeah, this is pretty accurate. I think you would want to have more of a clean, controlled environment for this. And as a pre-med, we did most of our stuff in labs, and it wasn't on people or anything alive. But yeah, like you see this and you hear about this, and surgery is really gross a lot of the time. So I would say this is 10 out of 10 accurate. A bit graphic, but that's really what it's like. That is it for today. Maybe they'll have me back to do more of these and break down more scenes another time, but thanks for breaking down movies with my experiences with 3 semesters of being a pre-medical student almost 20 years ago. I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. And if you've got any suggestions for the scenes for the next one, throw them in the comments.